I'm Beatrice Williams, 59 years old, and that Thanksgiving dinner changed everything. For almost a year after Richard died, I lived in what I thought was my son's home. Matthew and Ashley had been generous to take me in, or so I believed. The table fell silent when Ashley stood up, wine glass in hand, and said those words, "Your free ride is over, pay rent, or leave my house." My hands trembled as the room spun around me. 10 months of quiet disrespect had finally erupted into public humiliation. What Ashley didn't know was that I'd already discovered something important about this house, something that would turn her ultimatum upside down. Let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. If you've ever had a family member disrespect you, hit that subscribe button and join me as I share how I found the courage to stand up for myself when I needed it most. The Boston suburbs in autumn are breathtaking, especially in our neighborhood with its mature maple trees lining the streets. Richard and I bought our colonial-style home 30 years ago when Matthew was just a toddler. Back then, it was the biggest investment we'd ever made, and sometimes I'd wake in the middle of the night worrying about the mortgage payments. But Richard, ever the steady one, would hold my hand and say, "Be a brick by brick, we're building our forever home." For 35 years, Richard was my rock, my compass, my best friend. We met in college, him studying engineering, me pursuing education. He was the quiet, thoughtful type who planned everything meticulously, while I was more spontaneous. Somehow, we balanced each other perfectly. Our wedding was small but beautiful under a maple tree at my parents' farm in western Massachusetts. Richard promised to build me a life filled with love and security, and he kept that promise every single day. Matthew came along 7 years into our marriage after we'd nearly given up hope of having children. He was our miracle baby, and from the moment he arrived, our world revolved around him. Richard built a treehouse in the backyard, coached Little League, and spent countless hours helping with science projects. I read bedtime stories, volunteered at school, and kept a childhood memory box that grew so full we eventually needed 3 of them. "You spoil that boy," Richard would say, with a smile, even as he was building Matthew a custom desk for college. Maybe we did. Matthew grew up confident, smart, and with a good heart. He graduated with honors from Boston University, landed a good job in financial consulting, and seemed to have inherited the best traits from both of us. The only thing Richard and I ever worried about was his tendency to avoid conflict at any cost. A peacekeeper to a fault. Then, Ashley entered the picture 4 years ago. I remember Matthew bringing her to Sunday dinner for the first time. She was undeniably beautiful, tall, slender, with perfectly styled blonde hair, in an outfit that looked straight from a magazine. She worked as a high-end real estate agent, specializing in luxury properties, and carried herself with the confidence of someone used to getting what she wanted. "She's ambitious," Richard whispered to me in the kitchen while they sat in the living room. "Reminds me of my sister at that age." That wasn't entirely a compliment. Richard's sister had climbed the corporate ladder impressively, but had burned through 3 marriages in the process. Still, I was determined to welcome Ashley into our family. When Matthew announced their engagement after just 10 months of dating, I threw myself into helping plan their wedding. Ashley had very specific ideas about everything, from the venue to the flowers to the seating arrangements. Several times, she overruled my suggestions with a dismissive, "That's a bit old-fashioned, Beatrice." But I bit my tongue. This was their day, not mine. Richard was less diplomatic. "That girl sees Matthew as a project," he told me one night. "She's molding him into what she wants." Give her a chance, I said, though privately, I shared his concerns. She makes Matthew happy. The wedding was picture perfect, exactly as Ashley had planned. Matthew beamed all day, clearly smitten with his bride. Richard walked me back to our table after our mother-son dance, squeezing my hand as we watched the newlyweds. Just promise me one thing, B, he said quietly. If anything ever happens to me, make sure you're taken care of. Don't let anyone push you around, not even our son. I laughed it off then. Richard was only 62 in good health, and retirement was on the horizon. We had plans to travel to finally visit Italy and Greece. Death felt like a distant concern. But life doesn't follow our carefully laid plans. Just 18 months after Matthew and Ashley's wedding, Richard complained of indigestion after dinner. By midnight, we were in the emergency room. By dawn, he was gone. A massive heart attack that no one saw coming. The weeks that followed passed in a blur of funeral arrangements, paperwork, and numbing grief. Matthew was my lifeline, coming by, daily handling calls, making sure I ate. Ashley came too, though she often stayed in the car, citing important work calls. I wandered our house like a ghost, touching Richard's things, sleeping on his side of the bed, wearing his sweaters. Our home, once warm and full of laughter, felt cavernous and cold. I'd catch myself calling out to him when I heard a noise, only to be met with crushing silence. 2 months after the funeral, Matthew broached the subject during Sunday dinner at their apartment. Mom, we've been talking, he began, glancing at Ashley for support. We don't think you should be alone in that big house. I'm fine, really, I assured him, though we all knew that wasn't entirely true. We have that spare room, Matthew continued. It's small, but it would be yours. You could sell the house, invest the money, and stay with us until you figure out your next step. Ashley nodded along, though I noticed she didn't quite meet my eyes. It makes financial sense, Beatrice. The housing market is strong right now. You could get top dollar. Something about the eager way she said it gave me pause. But grief had clouded my judgment. The thought of living in the house without Richard, for years to come, suddenly seemed unbearable. Maybe a fresh start would help. We could look at some nice condos for you later, Ashley added. Something manageable with no stairs. She made me sound ancient, though I was only 58 at the time. Still, the idea of having family nearby was appealing, and Matthew seemed so earnest in his desire to help. I'll think about it, I promised. A week later, I agreed to their proposal. The house sold quickly, as Ashley had predicted. After paying off the remaining mortgage and setting aside a significant amount for a scholarship fund in Richard's name at the engineering school, where he taught part-time, I put the rest in secure investments, as Richard and I had always discussed. Moving day was harder than I'd anticipated. Each item packed felt like saying goodbye to Richard all over again. Matthew helped, but Ashley was conspicuously absent, citing a big property, showing that couldn't be rescheduled. Their home was a modern townhouse in a trendy neighborhood, sleek minimalist and half the size of our family home. The guest room that would be mine was indeed small, barely fitting a twin bed and dresser with no closet. My clothes would need to stay in boxes in the garage, Ashley explained, since their storage was already maximized. It's perfect. I lied, not wanting to seem ungrateful. Thank you both so much. Matthew hugged me tight. We want you here, Mom. Over his shoulder, I caught Ashley's expression, a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. In that moment, I had my first inkling that we might not fully include her, but I pushed the thought away. We were family now. We would make it work. I couldn't have imagined then how quickly that family bond would unravel, or that by next Thanksgiving, I would be standing at a dinner table, facing the most humiliating moment of my life and the most empowering. The first few weeks living with Matthew and Ashley were a careful dance of adjustment. I tried to make myself useful without being intrusive, waking early to make coffee before they got up, keeping my belongings confined to my small room, and offering to cook dinner most evenings. "Mom, you don't have to cook every night," Matthew protested when he found me preparing lasagna one Wednesday. "I enjoy it," I assured him. "It gives me something to do." What I didn't say was that cooking was the only time I felt truly at home in their house, where every surface was decorated with Ashley's carefully curated accessories that seemed designed more for appearance than comfort. Ashley accepted my cooking with minimal comment, though she often picked at the food, claiming to be watching her carbs or having had a late lunch. She worked long hours sometimes, not returning until 8 or 9 at night. When she was home, she spent most of her time on her phone or laptop marketing properties and networking on social media. "Your mother certainly likes to keep busy," I overheard her telling Matthew one evening when they thought I was watching TV with headphones on. "Don't you think it's a bit much? I feel like she's always around." "She's just trying to help," Matthew defended, though his voice was low conciliatory. "It's still an adjustment for her." "It's an adjustment for all of us," Ashley replied. "I just didn't expect to have a roommate at this point in our marriage." The comment stung, but I pretended not to hear. After that, I made more effort to give them space, taking long walks in the afternoons and joining a grief support group that met twice weekly at the community center. I made a few acquaintances there, other widows and widowers navigating the strange, new terrain of life alone. It helped to talk with people who understood the random waves of sadness that could hit, without warning, the phantom conversations with partners no longer there. One woman in particular, Diane, became a friend. She was a few years older than me, having lost her husband to cancer the previous year. "How's life with the kids?" she asked during coffee, after one meeting about 3 months into my new living arrangement. "It's fine," I said automatically, then sighed. "Actually, it's harder than I expected. I feel like I'm walking on eggshells in their home." Diane nodded knowingly. "My daughter invited me to live with them too. I lasted 6 weeks before I found my own apartment. Love them dearly, but there's nothing like having your own space." "I sold my house," I reminded her, "and most of the money went to Richard's scholarship fund. No regrets there." I thought about the thank you letters I'd already received from the first 2 scholarship recipients, bright, dedicated engineering students who reminded me of Richard at that age. Know that money is doing exactly what it should. But as the months passed, small irritations began to accumulate. Ashley started leaving notes around the house, little reminders about how I should load the dishwasher, which cleaning products to use on the granite countertops, a request to remove my shoes at the door, even though she and Matthew often didn't. "Just try to accommodate her," Matthew urged when I mentioned the notes. "Ashley likes things a certain way." "I understand that," I said. "But this is starting to feel less like living together and more like having a very particular landlord." Matthew winced at the comparison. "She's under a lot of pressure at work. The real estate market is getting competitive, and she's trying to break into a higher price bracket." I nodded and dropped the subject, not wanting to create tension between them. Matthew had always been a peacekeeper, even as a child, and I could see him struggling in his role as mediator. Then came the first direct confrontation, about 5 months into our arrangement. I had been using a small corner of the living room as a reading nook with a comfortable chair I'd brought from my old house and a small bookshelf. "Beatrice, "We need to talk about your things in the living room," Ashley said one evening when Matthew was working late. "This is really a shared space, and your chair doesn't match our aesthetic." "Oh," I said, surprised. "Matthew helped me set it up. I thought it was okay." "Well, we've been invited to be featured in Modern Home magazine for their Young Professionals issue, and the photographer will be here next week. I need the space to look cohesive." "I see," I said, trying to hide my hurt. "Where would you like me to move it?" "Your room would be best," she said brightly, as if offering a wonderful solution. "Or the garage, if it doesn't fit." My room barely had space to walk around the bed, let alone add a reading chair. "The garage isn't climate controlled," I pointed out. "The leather will crack." Ashley shrugged. "Then maybe it's time to consider downsizing further. We really don't have space for extra furniture." That night, I lay awake in my narrow bed, feeling increasingly like an unwanted guest rather than family. Richard's words echoed in my mind. "Don't let anyone push you around, not even our son." But what options did I have? My teacher's pension covered my personal expenses, but not enough for rent in this area. And the thought of moving away from Matthew, my only child, was painful. The next day, I came home from my grief group to find my reading chair gone from the living room. Matthew was moving it into the garage, struggling with its weight. "Ashley said you agreed to this," he panted, setting it down next to boxes of Christmas decorations. I opened my mouth to correct him, then stopped. What would be the point? Creating conflict would only make my living situation more uncomfortable. "It's fine," I said instead. "I can read in my room." Matthew looked relieved, and I realized with a sinking feeling that he'd been dreading a confrontation. My son, who once stood up to bullies on the playground and defended underdogs without hesitation, had become conflict avoidant in his own home. I wondered what other compromises he made to keep the peace with Ashley. As summer turned to fall, the atmosphere in the house grew increasingly tense. Ashley began commenting on the groceries I bought, suggesting they were taking up too much space in the refrigerator. She mentioned the water bill being higher since I moved in. There were pointed remarks about how much time I spent in the bathroom in the mornings, even though I deliberately woke early to avoid disrupting their routines. "Don't use my facial serum," she told me one day, holding up an expensive-looking bottle she'd found in the bathroom we shared. "It's $300 an ounce." "I haven't touched your skincare products," I assured her, confused by the accusation. "Well, someone has. The level is lower than it was yesterday." "Perhaps it evaporated," I suggested. "Or maybe Matthew used some—" She scoffed at both suggestions. "Just stick to your own things, okay? We're already subsidizing your living expenses. The least you can do is respect boundaries." The word subsidizing hit like a slap. Was that how they viewed my presence? As a charity case. That evening, I overheard Ashley on the phone with a friend while I was in the garden just outside the kitchen window. "I can't deal with it anymore," she was saying. "She's everywhere all the time, using our utilities, eating our food, taking up space. And Matthew won't even discuss asking her to contribute." A pause as the friend responded. "Of course she has money. She sold that big house, didn't she? But she donated a chunk to some scholarship and acts like that makes her Mother Teresa. Meanwhile, we're stuck with her indefinitely." Another pause. "Well, I'm bringing this up at Thanksgiving. The whole family will be there, and she won't be able to make Matthew feel guilty in front of everyone. It's been almost a year of free living. Time's up." I backed away from the window, my heart pounding. So that was Ashley's plan. To ambush me at Thanksgiving dinner in front of both families. The humiliation would be unbearable. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Richard, what he would advise me to do. He had always been the practical one, the planner, while I tended to make decisions from the heart. What would his logical engineer's mind suggest in this situation? The answer came to me around dawn. Richard would tell me to understand my position, legally, financially, and emotionally. He would say, "Get the facts, B, then make your plan." The next day, I called Harold Gordon, Richard's old friend and our family attorney. Harold had handled Richard's will and helped with all the paperwork after his death. "Beatrice, good to hear from you." His warm voice came through the phone. "How are you settling in with Matthew and Ashley?" "That's actually why I'm calling," I admitted. "Things are becoming difficult. I need some advice." "Come to my office," he said without hesitation. Tomorrow at 10, Harold's downtown office hadn't changed in 20 years. Still the same leather chairs, law books lining the walls, and photographs of his fishing trips with Richard displayed proudly on his desk. "Tell me everything," he said after his secretary had brought us coffee. I explained the situation, the increasing tension, the overheard phone call, the planned Thanksgiving confrontation. Harold listened carefully, taking notes occasionally. "Before we discuss options," he said when I'd finished, "let me ask you something. Did Richard ever mention anything to you about the house? About ownership? What do you mean? The house you sold when you moved in with Matthew. Did you look at the deed carefully?" I frowned, trying to remember. "I assume it was in both our names. When we bought it, we were both on the mortgage." Harold nodded, opening a file on his desk. "Let me check something. I handled the closing when you sold it, but Richard had me make some changes years ago that you might not be aware of." He scanned some documents, then looked up with a small smile. "Beatrice, the house wasn't in both your names when you sold it. It was solely in your name." "What? That can't be right. We bought it together." "Yes, you did. But 15 years ago, Richard transferred his portion of the ownership to you. And 5 years after that, he put the house entirely in your name as part of his estate planning." I sat back stunned. "He never told me." "He wanted it to be a safety net for you," Harold explained. "He was always practical that way. Said it was better than life insurance, an asset that would appreciate over time. So when I sold the house, all proceeds were rightfully yours, with no legal obligation to share them with Matthew or anyone else. The scholarship fund was your choice, not a requirement." This information shifted something fundamental in my understanding of the past year. I hadn't been a charity case dependent on my son and daughter-in-law's generosity. I had resources, more than I realized. "There's something else," Harold said, checking another document. "The townhouse where Matthew and Ashley live. Did you know Richard helped them buy it?" I shook my head, confused. "They bought it a year before we got married. Matthew said they saved for the down payment." Harold's expression was sympathetic. "Richard gave Matthew a significant sum for that down payment. He asked me not to tell you at the time. Said he didn't want to undermine Matthew's sense of achievement. But he did help, substantially." The revelation was like a piece of a puzzle clicking into place. Richard had always believed in helping family, but he also believed in maintaining dignity and independence. He would never have wanted me to feel beholden to anyone, especially not our son. "What should I do, Harold?" I asked finally. "That depends on what you want," he replied. "If you want to continue living with them, we could draft a formal agreement specifying your rights and responsibilities. Or you could look for your own place. Your financial situation is better than you thought." I considered my options carefully. "And what about Thanksgiving, the ambush Ashley is planning?" Harold's eyes twinkled with a hint of mischief I remembered from his and Richard's fishing trips. "Well, sometimes the best defense is a good offense. If you want to be prepared for that conversation, I have some suggestions. By the time I left Harold's office, I had a clear understanding of my position and a plan for Thanksgiving. Richard had given me more than a house. He'd given me the security to stand on my own 2 feet. Now, I just needed to find the courage to do it. As Thanksgiving approached, I channeled my nervous energy into preparations. Despite the tension with Ashley, I was determined to make the holiday special. This would be our first Thanksgiving without Richard, and maintaining family traditions felt important. I thought I'd make Richard's cornbread stuffing recipe I mentioned to Matthew one evening, and maybe the cranberry relish your grandmother used to make. "That sounds great, Mom," he said, though he seemed distracted. "Ashley's parents are bringing dessert, and her sister might come too if her flight gets in on time." "The more the merrier," I said with forced cheerfulness. "I'll set up the dining room to accommodate everyone." Ashley, who had been scrolling through her phone on the couch, looked up. "Actually, I've already planned the table settings. Modern harvest is the theme. Very minimal. I ordered everything last week." "Oh," I said, trying to hide my disappointment. For 30 years, I'd used my mother's hand-painted autumn plates and the table runner Richard's mother had embroidered. "What about the silverware I have, that nice set from—" "Everything's taken care of," Ashley interrupted. "We're using our wedding china and flatware. It's all coordinated." I nodded and retreated to my room, feeling another small piece of my role in the family slip away. Still, I reminded myself of Harold's advice. "Choose your battles, Beatrice. Thanksgiving isn't about plates or decorations." The morning of Thanksgiving arrived cold and clear, with just enough chill in the air to justify a fire in the rarely used fireplace. I woke early, as had been my habit since moving in with Matthew and Ashley, and started the turkey. Years of hosting had made the preparations second nature to me, and there was comfort in the familiar routine. Ashley appeared around 9, already dressed in a stylish, rust-colored dress, her hair and makeup perfect. "You're cooking in that?" she asked, eyeing my comfortable jeans and Richard's old sweater that I still wore on important days to feel close to him. "I'll change before guests arrive," I assured her. "This is just my cooking outfit." She pursed her lips but said nothing, busying herself with rearranging the decorative gourds she'd placed around the house. When I glanced at the dining room, I saw she had indeed created a magazine-worthy tablescape. Copper chargers, cream-colored plates, and modern centerpieces of dried wheat and white pumpkins. It was beautiful, if impersonal. Matthew helped where he could, though he admitted that cooking had never been his strong suit. Dad was the same way. I reminded him. He could build a deck or rewire the house, but boiling water was a challenge. The memory made us both smile, a moment of connection that had been increasingly rare lately. By 2 o'clock, everything was ready, and I had changed into a blue dress that Richard had always liked. I'd just finished touching up my makeup when the doorbell rang, announcing the first guests. My sister Eleanor and her husband Tom arrived first, bringing a bottle of wine and warm hugs. "You look tired," Eleanor whispered as she embraced me. "Everything okay? We'll talk later," I promised, aware of Ashley hovering nearby. James, Richard's older brother, arrived next with his wife Susan. James had Richard's same thoughtful eyes and quiet demeanor, and seeing him always gave me a pang of both comfort and grief. "Beatrice," he said, enfolding me in a bear hug, "Richard would be proud of how you're holding up." Would he, though I wondered? Would he be proud of how I'd let myself be sidelined in my own family Ashley's parents, Robert and Cynthia, were the last to arrive. They were polite but reserved, successful professionals who had raised Ashley with every advantage and clearly doted on her still. "What a lovely home you have," Cynthia commented, looking around the townhouse. "Ashley has always had an eye for design." "Yes, she's made it beautiful," I agreed, catching Ashley's satisfied smile. As we gathered around the table, I felt a growing knot of anxiety in my stomach. Would Ashley really go through with her plan to confront me here in front of everyone? Part of me still couldn't believe she would be so bold. But another part, the part that had been paying attention these past months, knew she was perfectly capable of it. The meal began pleasantly enough. The food was praised, wine was poured, and conversation flowed around the table. Matthew proposed a toast to Richard's memory that brought tears to my eyes, and James shared a funny story about their childhood that had everyone laughing. It was during the lull between the main course and dessert that Ashley clinked her glass with her fork, drawing everyone's attention. "Since we're all here together, there's something Matthew and I wanted to discuss," she began, though Matthew's surprised expression suggested this was news to him as well. My heart began to race as I recognized the preamble to what I'd been dreading. "As you all know, Beatrice has been living with us since Richard passed away," Ashley continued. "And while we've been happy to provide a home for her during this difficult time, we need to discuss more permanent arrangements." The table fell silent, everyone sensing the tension beneath her words. "What kind of arrangements?" Eleanor asked, her protective instincts clearly activated. Ashley smiled tightly. "Well, maintaining a household is expensive, especially in this area. Mortgage, utilities, groceries. It all adds up." "Ashley," Matthew began, his voice low, "maybe this isn't the best time to—" "When is a good time, Matthew?" Ashley cut him off. "It's been almost a year. We need to be practical." She turned to me directly, now her eyes hard despite her smile. "Beatrice, Matthew, and I think it's reasonable to ask for a contribution toward household expenses if you're going to continue living here. We're thinking $2,500 a month for the room, which is actually below market rate for this neighborhood." The table erupted in shocked murmurs. $2,500 was an outrageous sum for the tiny room I occupied, and everyone knew it. "Ashley," Matthew exclaimed, clearly horrified. "We never discussed that amount." But Ashley was on a roll now, her frustration of months finally finding its outlet. She stood up, wine glass in hand, her voice rising. "Your free ride is over. Pay rent or leave my house," she announced to the stunned table. "We're not running a charity here. Everyone else has to pay their way in life." The silence that followed was deafening. Eleanor looked ready to launch across the table at Ashley. James was shaking his head in disbelief. Even Ashley's parents seemed mortified by their daughter's outburst. I felt the blood rush to my face, humiliation washing over me in hot waves. For a moment, I couldn't speak, couldn't move. Then, slowly, I pushed back my chair and stood up. "I think," I said carefully, my voice steadier than I felt, "that there's been a misunderstanding about this house and who owns it." All eyes turned to me as I stood at the table, my hands trembling slightly, but my voice finding strength with each word. "What do you mean, Mom?" Matthew asked, confusion written across his face. I took a deep breath, remembering Harold's advice. Be clear, be factual, and above all, be dignified. 3 weeks ago, after overhearing Ashley's plans to confront me at Thanksgiving, I went to see Harold Gordon, your father's attorney and friend. I explained, looking directly at Matthew. I needed to understand my financial and legal position. Ashley shifted uncomfortably in her seat. That hardly seems necessary. Please let me finish, I said firmly. What Harold showed me was quite illuminating. You see, I'd always assumed your father and I owned our home jointly. But 15 years ago, Richard transferred his portion of the ownership to me. And 5 years after that, he put the house entirely in my name. I reached into the small purse I'd kept beside my chair and withdrew the documents Harold had given me. I placed them on the table where everyone could see. This is the title search Harold ran. As you can see, the house was solely in my name when I sold it. The proceeds were legally mine alone. Matthew picked up the papers, scanning them with wide eyes. Dad put the house in your name. Why didn't he say anything? Your father was always planning for the future, I explained gently. He wanted to make sure I was protected no matter what happened. Ashley's face had paled considerably. That doesn't change the fact that you're living in our house now rent-free. About that, I continued, pulling out another document. Harold also found this interesting record. Matthew, did you tell me the full story about how you and Ashley purchased this townhouse? Matthew's expression turned wary. What do you mean? According to Harold's records, Richard gave you a significant sum for the down payment, nearly half the amount, in fact. The revelation hung in the air like a thundercloud. Ashley's parents exchanged glances, clearly surprised by this information. Is this true? Robert Ashley's father asked Matthew directly. Matthew looked down at his plate. Yes, Dad helped us with the down payment, but we've been making the mortgage payments ourselves. Why didn't you tell me? I asked softly. Dad asked me not to, Matthew admitted. He said it was between us that you might worry about him spending so much from your retirement savings. He said it was an investment in our future. Ashley stood up again, her composure cracking. This is ridiculous. So what if Richard helped with the down payment? We still own this house. We're still the ones paying the mortgage every month. Yes, you are, I agreed calmly, and I would never suggest otherwise. But I think it's important that we all understand the true circumstances here. I'm not a freeloader taking advantage of your generosity, Ashley. I'm a widow who sold her home and donated a significant portion of the proceeds to honor her husband's memory while her son kindly offered her a place to stay during a difficult transition. Eleanor was nodding approvingly. James had a small smile, playing at the corners of his mouth, that reminded me so much of Richard when he was proud of someone. Ashley looked to her parents for support, but they seemed as uncomfortable as everyone else. Cynthia reached out to touch her daughter's arm. Ashley, perhaps we should take a step back here. No, Ashley pulled away. This is our house. We decide who lives here and under what conditions. Ashley. Matthew said, his voice firmer than I'd heard it in months. Stop, please. The authority in his tone seemed to surprise her as much as it did me. My peacekeeping son was finally finding his voice. Mom is family, he continued. She's not a tenant, and we're not landlords. She's my mother and your mother-in-law. And if Dad helped us buy this house, which he did significantly, then the least we can do is provide her a place to stay without treating her like a burden. Ashley's eyes filled with angry tears. So that's it. She just lives with us forever for free. What about our plans, Matthew? What about the bigger house we want to buy? The children we want to have? Where will a baby sleep if your mother has the guest room indefinitely? The room fell silent again at this raw display of the underlying tensions that had been building in their marriage. I have no intention of living with you indefinitely, I said into the silence. In fact, I've been exploring other options. All eyes turned back to me. Harold helped me review my finances. With the proceeds from the house sale and my teacher's pension, I can afford a small place of my own. I've already looked at a few apartments near the park. "You're moving out?" Matthew asked, sounding both relieved and guilty for feeling relieved. "I think it's for the best," I said gently. "But I wanted to clear the air first to make sure everyone understands the reality of the situation. I'm not leaving because I'm being evicted or because I can't afford to contribute. I'm leaving because I deserve to live somewhere I'm truly welcome, where I'm not made to feel like a burden." Ashley had the grace to look somewhat ashamed, though her jaw remained set stubbornly. "I don't need $2,500 a month from you, Beatrice," she said stiffly. "I just think adults should pay their way." "And I agree," I replied, "which is why I've been buying groceries, cooking meals, and helping with housework since I moved in. But you're right about one thing. This arrangement isn't working for any of us." James cleared his throat. "Beatrice, Susan, and I have plenty of room at our place if you want to stay with us until you find somewhere." "Thank you, James. I might take you up on that." Eleanor chimed in, "Or with us. The kids would love having their Aunt Bee around." The show of family support warmed my heart and seemed to further deflate Ashley's righteous indignation. Robert, who had been quiet throughout the exchange, finally spoke up. "If I may offer a suggestion," he said, looking between Ashley and me, "perhaps we all need to take a step back and remember what Thanksgiving is supposed to be about. Family gratitude coming together, not confrontations over money." Cynthia nodded emphatically. "Ashley, honey, I raised you better than this. Demanding rent from your mother-in-law during Thanksgiving dinner. What were you thinking?" Ashley's defenses finally crumbled completely under her mother's disapproval. I didn't, we need our own space," she finished lamely. "And you'll have it," I assured her. "I'll start packing tomorrow." The rest of the evening was awkward, but civil. Ashley retreated to the kitchen under the pretense of making coffee, while her mother followed, no doubt, to have a private conversation. Matthew helped me clear the table, his eyes apologetic. "I'm sorry, Mom. I had no idea she was planning that ambush." "I know, sweetheart." And I did know. My son wasn't cruel, just caught between two strong-willed women who both loved him in very different ways. As the guests prepared to leave, James hugged me tight. "Richard would be proud of how you handled that," he whispered. "Standing your ground with dignity. That's the Beatrice he loved." Eleanor was less diplomatic as we stood on the porch. "I never liked that girl," she muttered. "Too impressed with herself by half. You should move in with us, Bee. Really." "I'll be fine," I assured her. "This is for the best. I need my own space, too." After everyone had gone, I found Matthew alone in the living room, staring at the fireplace where the last embers were dying. "We should talk," I said, sitting beside him on the couch. He nodded, looking exhausted. "I'm so sorry about tonight, Mom." I knew Ashley was frustrated, but I never thought she'd do something like that. "It's been building for a while," I acknowledged. "We both know that. Why didn't you tell me you were looking at apartments?" "I wasn't sure until recently that I could afford it. And honestly, I didn't want to hurt your feelings." Matthew rubbed his face tiredly. "My feelings, Mom. I've been watching you shrink yourself to fit into our life for almost a year. Making yourself smaller, quieter, less present. It's been killing me." "Then why didn't you say something?" I asked gently. He sighed. "Because I wanted everyone to be happy. I wanted to take care of you after Dad died, but I also wanted my marriage to work. I thought I could have both if I just..." Manage things carefully. Oh, Matthew, I said, taking his hand. You can't manage other people's feelings. Your father taught me that. All you can do is be honest and kind and hope they do the same. I should have stood up for you sooner, he admitted. When Ashley started leaving those notes, when she made you move your chair, all those little moments when she was disrespectful. And I should have been more honest about how I was feeling, I countered. We've both been walking on eggshells, haven't we? He nodded, a sad smile crossing his face. Dad would be disappointed in me. No, I said firmly. Your father would understand. He always said you had the biggest heart of anyone he knew. You just want everyone to be happy, and there's nothing wrong with that. But sometimes, sweetheart, conflict is necessary for growth. We talked for hours that night, really talked, in a way we hadn't since before Richard died. About grief and loss, about marriage and compromise, about standing up for yourself without trampling others. It was healing for both of us, a clearing of the air that was long overdue. Around midnight, Ashley finally emerged from their bedroom, where she'd retreated after the guests left. Her eyes were red from crying, but her composure had returned. I think we all said things we didn't mean tonight, she began, sitting across from us. I raised an eyebrow, but said nothing. I hadn't, in fact, said anything I didn't mean. I shouldn't have brought up the financial situation at Thanksgiving dinner, she continued. It was inappropriate and hurtful. I apologize for that, Beatrice. Thank you, Ashley, I replied, accepting the partial apology for what it was. I understand that having me here has been an adjustment for you. It has, she agreed quickly. This townhouse isn't big enough for 3 adults living completely separate lives. But that doesn't excuse how I handled things tonight. Matthew reached for her hand. We should have discussed it privately, all 3 of us. Found a solution that worked for everyone. Ashley nodded, though I noticed she didn't quite meet my eyes. So you're really going to move out? Yes, I confirmed. It's time. You 2 need your space, and frankly, so do I. Where will you go? She asked, sounding genuinely curious for once. There's a small apartment complex near the park that has a unit available next month. It's within my budget and has a lovely view of the gardens. The Parkside Residences, Ashley asked, her real estate knowledge kicking in. Those are nice. Good security, well maintained. For a moment, I glimpsed the professional, competent woman my son had fallen in love with, rather than the territorial daughter-in-law I'd come to know. Yes, that's the one. I'm going to see it again on Monday to fill out an application. I could help with the paperwork, Ashley offered, surprising me. Make sure you're getting a fair deal. It's the least I can do after, well, everything. It was a small olive branch, but I took it. That would be helpful, thank you. As we all prepared to turn in for the night, exhausted by the emotional day, Matthew hugged me tightly at my bedroom door. We'll figure this out, Mom. All of us. I know we will, I assured him, and for the first time in months, I truly believed it. That night, I slept more peacefully than I had since Richard died. The truth was, out the air was cleared, and a new path forward was emerging from the ashes of a very unconventional Thanksgiving. Sometimes I reflected, as I drifted off, the most difficult conversations lead to the most necessary changes. The 2 weeks following Thanksgiving were a flurry of activity. My application for the apartment near the park was approved, and with Harold's help, I arranged for the necessary funds to cover the security deposit and first month's rent. The unit was small, but bright, with large windows overlooking a community garden and enough space for the few pieces of furniture I'd managed to keep when I moved in with Matthew and Ashley. It's perfect for you, Mom, Matthew said when he came to see it. He'd been helping me prepare for the move, coming by after work to assist with paperwork and planning. I can build some shelves along this wall for your books. His offer reminded me so much of Richard that my heart squeezed painfully. That would be wonderful, thank you. Ashley, true to her word, had reviewed my lease agreement with a professional eye, pointing out a few clauses that needed clarification. It was the most cordial we'd been with each other in months, though there remained an undercurrent of tension between us. The rent is reasonable for the area, she admitted as she handed back the annotated lease. And the terms are standard. Just make sure they fix that dripping faucet before you move in. I will, I promised. Thank you for looking it over. She nodded, not quite meeting my eyes. It's what I do. We hadn't directly addressed her Thanksgiving outburst again, both tacitly agreeing to focus on practical matters instead. There would be time for deeper reconciliation later, perhaps when the wounds weren't so fresh. Eleanor and James both offered to help with the move, along with several friends from my grief support group who had become important fixtures in my new life. Diane, in particular, was enthusiastic about my decision. Independence is underrated, she declared when I told her about the apartment. Just wait until you can leave dishes in the sink if you want to, or watch TV at 2 a.m, without worrying about disturbing anyone. The thought made me smile, though I'd always been too tidy for dishes in the sink. Still, there was something appealing about having my own space again, somewhere I could simply be myself without constantly monitoring my impact on others. As the moving date approached, Matthew began spending more evenings at the townhouse, helping me sort and pack my belongings. Ashley was frequently absent, claiming client meetings or showings that kept her out until late. When she was home, she was polite but distant, her interaction with Matthew noticeably strained. Is everything okay between you two? I finally asked one night, as Matthew and I labeled boxes in my soon-to-be former bedroom. He paused, marker in hand, considering how to answer. We're working through some things, he said carefully. Thanksgiving brought up some issues we've been avoiding. I'm sorry if my situation has caused problems in your marriage, I said sincerely. Matthew shook his head. It's not your fault, Mom. The issues were already there. Ashley and we want different things sometimes. We always have. I just didn't want to see it. I waited, giving him space to continue if he wanted to. She's very focused on appearances, on what other people think, he went on after a moment. The right house, in the right neighborhood, the right furniture, the right friends. Sometimes I wonder if I was just the right husband on paper. Good job, decent looks, compatible background. Do you love her? I asked, gently. Yes, he said, without hesitation. But sometimes, love isn't enough, is it? Dad used to say, marriage is about rowing in the same direction. I'm not sure Ashley and I are even in the same boat anymore. It was the most honest he'd been about his marriage, and it broke my heart to hear the pain in his voice. I moved to sit beside him on the floor, putting my arm around his shoulders as I had when he was a child. Marriage is hard work, I acknowledged. Your father and I had our rough patches too, times when we felt disconnected or frustrated with each other. How did you get through them? Communication, compromise, and remembering why we chose each other in the first place. I squeezed his shoulder. But both people have to be willing to do the work, Matthew. One person can't save a marriage alone. He nodded, leaning against me briefly. I've suggested counseling. Ashley's thinking about it. That's a positive step, I encouraged. Whatever happens, I want you to know that I'm here for you. Not to judge or to take sides, but to support you in whatever you decide is right for your life. Even if that means standing up to Ashley more, he asked, a hint of his old smile returning. Especially then, I assured him. Your father would be proud to see you finding your voice. The day before my move, Ashley surprised me by coming home early from work with a small potted plant, a peace lily. For your new place, she said, setting it on the kitchen counter. They're supposed to be good for purifying the air. The gesture was unexpected and oddly touching. Thank you, Ashley. That's thoughtful of you. She busied herself making tea, her back to me. I want you to know that I never disliked you personally, Beatrice. I had certain expectations about our life, about our home. Having a third person here disrupted that. It wasn't quite an apology, but it was probably the closest I would get. I understand, I said. Change is difficult for everyone, and grief makes it harder. She turned to face me finally, her expression guarded, but not hostile. Matthew says, you're coming for dinner next Sunday. If that's still okay, I confirmed. It is. She hesitated, then added, regular dinners might be good. For Matthew, he misses his dad a lot, and having you around helps. I recognized the concession for what it was. Not warmth exactly, but an acknowledgement that family connections mattered, even if they weren't always comfortable. I'd like that, I said simply. Moving day dawned clear and cold, a perfect December morning. James arrived early, with his truck, followed by Eleanor and Tom, with coffee and pastries for everyone. Matthew had taken the day off work to help, and even Ashley made an appearance, before heading to a client meeting, dressed impeccably as always, but making an effort to be pleasant. As we loaded the last of my boxes into James's truck, I took a final look around the room that had been my temporary home. It was small and had never truly felt like mine, but it had served its purpose, a safe harbor during the storm of early grief. Ready, Mom? Matthew asked, standing in the doorway. Ready, I confirmed, picking up my purse and the framed photo of Richard I'd kept on the nightstand. The new apartment welcomed us with streaming sunlight and the faint scent of fresh paint. The building manager had fixed the dripping faucet as promised, and even installed new blinds in the bedroom. It would take time to make it truly feel like home, but as my family helped unpack boxes and arrange furniture, I felt the first stirrings of genuine optimism since Richard's death. This corner is perfect for your reading chair, Eleanor declared, directing James and Matthew as they positioned the comfortable armchair I'd reclaimed from the garage. And look at the light from this window. Ideal for reading. Watching them work together, I was struck by how much Matthew resembled his father. The same careful attention to detail, the same quiet strength. Richard would have loved seeing him take charge like this, confident and capable. By late afternoon, the apartment was taking shape. Bookshelves lined one wall, filled with the books Richard and I had collected over our years together. My small dining table sat near the kitchen, already set, with the plates my mother had painted. The bedroom was cozy, with Richard's sweaters hanging in the closet alongside my clothes. It looks like you, Mom, Matthew said, as we all collapsed onto the couch in chairs, exhausted but satisfied. Warm, welcoming. It feels good, I admitted. A fresh start. As Eleanor and Tom prepared to leave, promising to return with a proper dinner later, Eleanor hugged me tightly. You did it, Bea. You stood up for yourself. I'm so proud of you. I had good support, I reminded her, thinking of everyone who had helped me find my footing again. Harold, with his legal guidance, Diane, and my grief group with their understanding, James and Eleanor, with their unwavering support, and even Matthew finding his own strength alongside me. Later, after everyone had gone, and I was alone in my new space, for the first time, I opened a special box I'd kept separate from the others. Inside were Richard's things that I hadn't been able to part with: his favorite coffee mug, the watch I'd given him on our 20th anniversary, the leather journal where he'd sketched house improvement plans. I arranged them carefully on a small table near the window, creating a small memorial corner. Then I added one final item: the framed photo of us on our last anniversary, both of us gray-haired, but smiling widely, faces etched with the lines of a life well lived together. "Well, Richard," I said to the photo, "I did it, just like you always said I could." I could almost hear his response, the quiet confidence he'd always had in me. "Of course you did, B. You're the strongest person I know." As night fell, I sat in my reclaimed reading chair with a cup of tea, looking out at the twinkling lights of the neighborhood. For the first time in months, perhaps since Richard's death, I felt truly at peace. The apartment was small, my future uncertain in many ways, but I had reclaimed something essential: my sense of self, my voice, my right to take up space in the world. The journey had been painful, the Thanksgiving confrontation humiliating, but perhaps it had been necessary. Sometimes we need to be pushed to our limits before we find the courage to set new boundaries, to insist on the respect we deserve. I thought of Matthew and Ashley, their marriage at a crossroads. I hoped they would find their way, either together or apart, to lives that fulfilled them both. And I hoped that our family bonds would heal and strengthen with time and distance. As for me, this new chapter was just beginning. There would be lonely moments, certainly nights when I would reach across the bed for a husband no longer there. But there would also be newfound freedoms, opportunities to rediscover myself beyond my roles as wife and mother. Richard had given me many gifts in our years together: love, partnership, a family, a home. But perhaps his greatest gift had been believing in my strength, even when I doubted it myself. In the end, he had been right. I was stronger than I knew capable of standing up for myself with dignity when it mattered most. As I prepared for my first night in my new home, I felt his presence everywhere. Not in grief now, but in gratitude for the life we'd shared and the wisdom he'd imparted. The greatest tribute I could pay to his memory was to live fully and authentically, to create a life that honored our past while embracing my future. "Good night, my love," I whispered to his photo before turning out the light. "Thank you for everything." And for the first time in many months, I fell asleep with a heart full of peace and possibility. 6 months after moving into my apartment, life had settled into a new rhythm that felt increasingly natural. My space had become truly mine, decorated with a mix of treasured items from my life with Richard and new pieces that reflected my evolving taste. The peace lily Ashley had given me was thriving on the windowsill, having grown significantly, and produced several elegant white blooms. Sunday dinners with Matthew had become a regular tradition, though not always at his and Ashley's townhouse. Sometimes he came to my apartment instead, and occasionally we met at restaurants around the city. These gatherings were usually just the two of us. Ashley joined less and less frequently as winter turned to spring. "We've decided to try a trial separation," Matthew finally admitted one Sunday in May as we walked through the park after dinner. "Ashley moved in with a friend last week. Though I'd suspected things were heading in this direction, the confirmation still caught me by surprise." "I'm sorry, Matthew. Are you okay?" He nodded, hands in his pockets, as he contemplated the path ahead of us. Better than I expected, actually. The past few months have been so tense, so full of arguments and cold silences. There's a certain relief in admitting we need space to figure things out. What happened? I asked, gently, not wanting to pry, but concerned for my son. Nothing dramatic, no affairs or betrayals. He kicked at a pebble on the path. Just the slow realization that we want fundamentally different things from life. Ashley is focused on status on climbing socially and professionally. She sees our home, our possessions, even our relationship as stepping stones to something else. And you don't? He shook his head. I want what you and Dad had. A partnership based on mutual respect and shared values. A home that feels warm and lived in, not a showpiece. Maybe kids someday, a dog weekend, projects in the garage. He smiled ruefully. All the things Ashley considers boring and conventional. We sat on a bench overlooking the pond, watching ducks glide across the surface as the evening light turned golden. I started therapy, Matthew continued after a comfortable silence. It's helping me understand some patterns in my life, like why I've always been such a peacekeeper, why I let Ashley make most of the decisions. And why is that? I asked, curious about his insights. Part of it is my personality, but part of it was watching Dad. He was so steady, so unflappable. He rarely got angry or insisted on his way. I thought that's what made him strong, his ability to let things go to compromise. I smiled, remembering Richard's calm demeanor. Your father was indeed a master of compromise. But what you might not have seen were the boundaries he set quietly but firmly. There were certain principles he never compromised. On certain lines, he wouldn't allow anyone to cross. Like putting the house in your name, Matthew noted. Making sure you were secure. Exactly. Richard understood the difference between flexibility and doormat. It's something I had to learn the hard way this past year. Matthew took my hand, his expression serious. I'm still sorry about Thanksgiving, Mom. About letting things get to that point. It was a necessary wake-up call for all of us, I assured him. Sometimes we need those moments of crisis to force us to confront truths we've been avoiding. As spring bloomed into summer, my life expanded in ways I hadn't anticipated. Diane, from my grief group, introduced me to a community garden project where I began volunteering twice a week. Eleanor convinced me to join her book club, which met monthly in members' homes for wine discussion and lots of laughter. And to my surprise, Harold Gordon invited me to join the board of Richard's Scholarship Foundation, where my perspective as an educator proved valuable. Richard would be thrilled to see you taking such an active role, Harold told me, after one particularly productive meeting. He always said you were the brains behind his brawn. The comment made me smile, remembering how Richard had always valued my input on his projects, from house renovations to career decisions. We had been true partners, each bringing different strengths to our relationship, but always respecting the other's contribution. My relationship with Ashley remained cordial but distant. She sent a polite birthday card in April and occasionally asked Matthew to extend greetings when he visited me. I reciprocated with similar pleasantries, both of us maintaining a minimum of civility for Matthew's sake. Whether their marriage would survive remained uncertain, but I had come to accept that it wasn't my business to fix or judge. One warm evening in July, I invited James and Susan over for dinner, along with Harold and his wife, Patricia. It was the first real dinner party I'd hosted since Richard's death, and there was something profoundly healing about filling my small apartment with conversation and laughter about cooking for people I cared about. To Richard, James proposed a toast as we sat around my dining table. Who would be proud of how we've all carried on? And to Beatrice, Harold added, raising his glass, who showed us all what grace under pressure looks like. Later, after everyone had gone, I sat on my small balcony, watching the stars appear one by one in the darkening sky. My life had contracted in some ways since Richard's death. My home was smaller, my daily routine more modest. But in other ways, it had expanded. I had discovered strengths I never knew I possessed, built new friendships, deepened existing ones, and found my voice when it mattered most. The title search that Harold had run that fateful day before Thanksgiving had revealed more than just the legal ownership of a house. It had uncovered the foundation of self-worth that Richard had always believed I had, even when I doubted it myself. In ensuring the house was in my name, he hadn't just provided financial security. He'd given me the confidence to stand up for myself when I needed to. A home, I'd come to realize, wasn't just a physical structure of wood and stone, of mortgages and titles. A true home was built on respect and love, on memories shared and challenges faced together. It was a place where you could be fully yourself, where your voice was heard, where your presence was welcomed rather than merely tolerated. In standing up to Ashley that Thanksgiving day, in refusing to be made small or insignificant, I hadn't just been defending my financial rights. I had been honoring the home Richard and I had built together over 35 years. Not the physical structure, but the foundation of mutual respect that had sustained our marriage through good times and bad. Matthew came by the next morning to help me hang some shelves in the kitchen, a skill he'd inherited from his father. As we worked together, I was struck by how our relationship had evolved in the past year. The crisis had stripped away pretense and forced honesty between us, ultimately strengthening our bond rather than weakening it. "You know what I realized yesterday," he said, as he measured carefully for the next bracket. "This apartment feels more like home than the townhouse ever did. It's got your spirit in it. That's the nicest compliment you could give me," I told him, handing him the drill. "A home should reflect the people who live there." "That's what I'm working on figuring out," he admitted. "Who I am, what kind of home I want to create, whether Ashley and I can build that together or if we need to go our separate ways. You'll figure it out," I assured him. "And whatever you decide, I'm here for you." As I survey my life now, I can see how far I've come from that devastating moment at the Thanksgiving table, when Ashley demanded rent from me in front of the whole family. The humiliation and shock I felt then have faded, replaced by a quiet confidence in my own worth and a deeper understanding of what truly matters. Richard used to say that the measure of a person isn't how they act when everything is going well, but how they respond when tested by adversity. By that standard, I hope he would be proud of how I've navigated this challenging chapter. I've learned to stand up for myself without losing my compassion, for others to set boundaries, without building walls to honor his memory, not just through preservation, but through growth. Home isn't just where you live, it's how you live. It's creating a space where dignity and respect flourish, where genuine connections are valued above appearances, where both roots and wings are celebrated. Whether that home is a sprawling house in the suburbs or a modest apartment overlooking a park, what matters is the spirit within its walls. Have you ever had to stand up for yourself against a family member who tried to diminish your worth? How did you find the strength to assert your boundaries while preserving important relationships? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if my journey from humiliation to empowerment has resonated with you in any way, please consider liking, subscribing, and sharing this video with someone who might need to hear that it's never too late to reclaim your dignity. Thank you for walking this path with me today, and remember that true home is wherever you are, valued, respected, and loved for exactly who you are.